It was faster. It was stealthier. By some accounts, it was the most advanced tactical fighter the world had ever seen. Designed in the shadows of a secret war, it was built to dominate the skies and ensure air supremacy for a generation. Yet, it lost.
The competitor, of course, in military was the Soviet Union. And they had a lot of good design teams, many of them, working on fighter airplanes. The Soviets could develop fighter airplanes, were capable of defeating ours in the sky. And that was enough for the Air Force to say, we better take a bold step forward with the next airplane.
This is the story of a machine that narrowly escaped the boneyard, a ghost of aviation history that now rests in silent glory. It's a factual account of human ingenuity, pride, and sacrifice by an elite team that built a seemingly invincible weapon. A team that, only after the project was cancelled, was granted clearance to finally tell their story.
Not a day was lost, and we were designing technology for B-2 and ATF together, side by side, daily.
This is the story of Northrop's YF-23 Black Widow II, a once highly classified secret. Our story begins during the height of the Cold War. At the time, the threat of mass destruction from a nuclear holocaust felt not just possible, but quite probable. Two superpowers were embroiled in an invisible conflict of arms escalation and the relentless pursuit of air superiority. With communist forces in Eastern Europe holding a 4-to-1 military advantage, there were legitimate concerns for the West's defense systems and the region's political stability. While the American F-15 Eagle held on to a slim advantage, the potential threat posed by swifter Soviet-built fighters like the MiG-29 and the advanced Su-27 flanker family posed a massive problem. If it was to counter the threat from the East, the United States and its aging air fleet needed a radical shift in aerial strategy. The first plan of action was the gathering of intelligence. The development costs to counter the threat were shared between the government and America's aerospace industries. DARPA's main priority was to implement the force multiplier concept. The Pentagon's ultimate strategic goal became low observability, the ability to fly undetected, now known as stealth. With the Pentagon's plan in place, the race for air superiority shifted into top gear. In the early 1980s, the Air Force began a concept development investigation, requesting proposals from the leading airframe companies for an advanced tactical fighter, or ATF. In 1983, 7 companies responded, but by 1986, the Pentagon had chosen only 2 winners, Northrop and Lockheed. They were contracted to develop 2 prototype aircraft, which would compete in a fly-off for a multi-billion-dollar government contract. The Pentagon also encouraged the other bidders to team up with either Northrop or Lockheed. For 50 years, Hawthorne, California-based Northrop had been a bold developer, designer, and supplier of high-performance aircraft, such as the F-5 and its legendary B-2 stealth bomber. Northrop teamed up with McDonnell Douglas, their longtime partner on the F-18 program, and a dominant fighter manufacturer that supplied the F-4 Phantom and the F-15 Eagle. Always an innovative company, Burbank, California-based Lockheed had been responsible for some of the most brilliant designs in the industry, including America's first jet fighter, the P-80, the U-2 spy plane, the SR-71, and the F-117 stealth fighter. Lockheed now teamed up with 2 formidable partners, Boeing, the giant commercial jet manufacturer, and General Dynamics, whose divisions designed submarines and tanks, as well as jet fighters. The histories of Lockheed and Northrop have been intertwined ever since Jack Northrop began his career with the Lockheed brothers in 1916. When he left to form his own company, the rivalry began, which continues even today. With more than $2 billion at stake, the capital risks were gigantic. 2 proud rivals were now locked in a contest to produce the most advanced tactical fighter the world had seen. Lockheed's YF-22 and Northrop's YF-23. Directives from the Pentagon were simple, yet required unprecedented advances in technology. First, the ATF had to be more maneuverable than the enemy. It had to fly supersonic without using a gas-guzzling afterburner, a capability known as Supercruise. It had to be low observable or invisible to enemy radar. It also had to be reliable and maintainable in adverse situations. If these other directives were met, they would ensure the final requirement, survivability. Their job was made even more complicated by the Pentagon's insistence that work would be designated top secret, special access required. Sensitivity to national security required it to be a black program, codenamed Senior Sky. Del Jacobs was appointed as Northrop's first ATF program manager and swiftly formed a special team to meet the challenge. Bob Sandusky was assigned as chief engineer and principal architect of the YF-23. Drafted from the B-2 division to head the YF-23 technology team was expert physicist Yu-Ping Liu. Yet despite their cloak and dagger secrecy, those working in the black world developed an unexpected camaraderie. As team spirit flourished, the contest had just begun to take shape. Sandusky's team knew that their design would have to defeat the most potent weapon that can be used against a fighter: radio azimuth detecting and ranging signals, commonly known as radar. Ever since 1940, when it was first effectively utilized by the British against the German Luftwaffe, radar has been evolving into far more sophisticated forms. There is only one way to hide from radar. It's called stealth. Stealth is the ability of an object or weapon to appear invisible to all enemy sensors. Top secret research in ways to avoid radar detection has continued for decades. It was Northrop and Lockheed which developed the first experimental versions of stealth aircraft. Lockheed's Have Blue program was the forerunner to the F-117 stealth fighter. Northrop's basis for their B-2 stealth bomber was the Tacit Blue program. This intelligence-gathering aircraft was the first stealthy aircraft with curved aerodynamic surfaces and was developed in a program that was so highly classified that for many years, the Pentagon did not even acknowledge that it existed. The two competitors followed different paths in designing their own ATF versions. Lockheed's design followed in the tradition of their Have Blue and F-117 creations, with sharply angled surfaces. Northrop's ATF design took on the distinctive characteristics of its stealth heritage, the B-2 bomber. The B-2, with its flowing organic lines and radar-deflecting profile, has a strategic advantage. Throughout the 8-year development of the YF-23, stealth techniques were being continuously tested and refined. The shape of the plane was determined by radar and wind tunnel tests. During one type of radar test, the aircraft model was placed on a pole and its cross-section illuminated with various high-frequency radar signals. Its radar cross-section, or RCS, was then measured and the data utilized in the design process. These tests were conducted at night at a secret location in the California desert, under cover from overhead satellite surveillance. Early in the program, during one such RCS test, the YF-23 first acquired the name Black Widow. The original Black Widow, Northrop's P-61, was built during World War II. It was a night fighter, fitted with the first ever radar-guided gun system, painted gloss black to deflect enemy searchlights. Since that time, the Black Widow has become legendary among aviation enthusiasts. Two separate prototypes of the YF-22 and of the YF-23 were built for the ATF program. These prototype air vehicles were designated PAV-1 and PAV-2. PAV-1 was powered with a Pratt & Whitney engine, and General Electric supplied the engine for PAV-2. The two engine companies were locked in their own fly-off competition for engine selection. Their goal? To build an engine that could fly at sustained supercruise speeds. The two massive engines produced 70,000 pounds of sea-level thrust, which, at maximum flight speed, produced more than 40,000 horsepower, nearly that of a Navy destroyer. The jet exhaust was also vulnerable to heat-seeking missiles. To lower the heat signature, an ingenious exhaust liner was designed, which cooled engine emissions from detection. The liner tiles, while similar in purpose to those found on the Space Shuttle, were far more complex and labor-intensive. Each one was meticulously installed by hand. All the operating functions were controlled by the Black Widow 2's unique avionics system. Its supercomputer, or core processor, performed numerous avionic functions, including radar, navigation, performance data, and situational awareness. Another important function was flight control. The central computer made the necessary flight corrections as the pilot flew the aircraft, a technique called fly-by-wire. The core processor was the YF-23's central nervous system. It was regarded as the most advanced for its era because it provided all the data in real time, performing an astounding 5 to 6 billion operations per second, compared to an IBM mainframe of the time running at a mere 400 million operations per second. The challenge for the engineering team was to integrate the computer system and its auxiliary components into the Black Widow 2's overall design package without affecting its maneuverability, the ability to supercruise, or its stealth signature. To ensure its smooth-flowing design, the Black Widow 2 was actually built from the outside in, which, in effect, was like building a plane backwards. To reduce the airplane's weight, covering the airframe was a unique graphite-based composite material, lighter than aluminum and capable of sustained supersonic flight. While Northrop pioneered the use of composites, they hadn't been used this extensively until PAV-1. Though Northrop and McDonnell Douglas produced the airframe, they relied on a network of specialized subcontractors who created the internal components, like the computers, actuators, and radar systems. There were now 10,000 people in 30 different states working in complete secrecy on the project. The ATF program was an immense undertaking. Building the plane from scratch generated a massive amount of test data, calculations, statistics, and reports. The paperwork alone was colossal. When a fighter is not in combat, it is still vulnerable to natural hazards. To alleviate the problem of bird strikes, Northrop turned to their specialist subcontractors. The challenge was to fabricate a specially coated radar deflective canopy, which was thin enough to be optically perfect, yet thick enough to withstand a bird strike at 400 knots. The common method of testing the canopy is to fire a 4-pound raw chicken from a high-velocity air cannon at it. But a 3/4 of an inch thick, unbreakable polycarbonate canopy absorbs the awesome forces of impact. Before the assemblies were installed in the prototypes, the major systems had to be tested. This was accomplished with the Iron Bird, a metal frame where the electrical and hydraulic systems could be laid out in exact detail and verified. At the controls were veteran test pilots Paul Metz and Jim Sandberg. But Metz faced a problem the first time he operated the simulator. He was to crash 75 more times in the simulator before the design was perfected. Metz and Sandberg, like most test pilots, were a breed apart. The simulator program was, in many respects, the most costly part of the ATF budget. Utilizing computer models, the test pilots simulated wargames and recreated combat situations, pitting the computerized version of PAV-1 against the best Soviet MiGs and American fighters. PAV-1 beat them all, hands down. But the success was overshadowed by a new set of problems. After 3 years, the financial stakes brought new pressures, but the team pushed on. With 20,000 hours logged in the simulators, the test pilots and engineers felt they were now ready to take their show out to the desert. 100 miles northeast of Los Angeles, on a desolate dry lakebed, lies Edwards Air Force Base, home to more historic aviation test exploits than any other test facility on the planet. The base was named after Captain Glenn Edwards, a test pilot killed while flying Northrop's original flying wing. Chuck Yeager smashed the sound barrier here in 1947, and it has also served as test headquarters for the successful B-2 stealth bomber program. In secretive nightly operations to elude overhead spy satellites, huge sections of the aircraft were hauled under armed guard to the base. There, a 125-member flight test crew assembled and tested, while thousands worked in support. In the early hours of June 22, 1990, the Black Widow 2 was finally completed. But moments before the scheduled rollout, Bob Sandusky was forced to apply some stealth interference of his own when an Air Force general wanted to carry out a last-minute inspection. A few minutes later, the black world secrecy that had shrouded the ATF program for the past 8 years was about to be lifted. For several weeks following the successful rollout, PAV-1 was given a variety of taxi tests. During one of the very first tests, the flaps and tail surfaces automatically began to activate. The computer sensitivity was adjusted to correct this anomaly. During the taxi tests, pilot Paul Metz had his first opportunity to experience the aircraft's true capabilities. At this stage of the ATF competition, Lockheed had yet to roll out their plane, and Northrop was at last ready to fly. At 3:30 a.m. on August 27, 1990, excited employees congregated in Hawthorne, boarded a fleet of buses in darkness, and headed out to the desert. Edwards Air Force Base, meanwhile, was a pulse of frenetic activity. Engineers, specialists, and the flight test crew were busy making final preparations for the big event. A photograph of PAV-1's first flight, proudly displaying Bob Sandusky's Black Widow signature, appeared on the cover of the next Aviation Week. In response, orders quickly came from above to have the hourglass immediately removed. As soon as the historic first flight was over, the on-ground celebrations began.
We see it get airborne. There's nothing like it. There's nothing in the world.
I was in the control room. I just could not wait. I went out of control. I want to see it fly.
On August 29, 1990, only 2 days after PAV-1's first flight, Lockheed triumphantly rolled out its YF-22. Now the contestants were dueling wing to wing. Over at Northrop, Jim Sandberg was behind the controls for the first flight of PAV-2. However, this time, an unforeseen problem occurred when the right landing gear failed to come down on the first try. After cycling it again, it deployed, and PAV-2 safely touched down without any further incidents. A month later, Lockheed flew their own airplane for the first time. The ATF competition had entered the final round. The agility, speed, and the avionics brain of the Black Widow 2 met the government requirements. The Pentagon's 10-to-1 force multiplier became a reality. For the record, the unclassified official top speed of the Black Widow 2 at Supercruise was nearly Mach 1.5 without afterburner, and Mach 1.8 at maximum power. Any speed above that remains classified. Other performance details are still, to this day, highly classified. Perhaps the ultimate satisfaction for the team occurred when PAV-1 and PAV-2 made their momentous formation flight. PAV-1 and its flight test crew now faced one of their biggest challenges, an exercise known as Surge Day. From dawn until dusk, 6 separate sorties were conducted. On April 23, 1991, the Pentagon made the decisive telephone call, identifying which company would recoup their $650 million investment. Soon after the announcement was made, the YF-23 Black Widow 2 program was dissolved, along with the hopes and dreams of the Northrop and McDonnell Douglas team that had worked on it. The classified components of PAV-1 and PAV-2, the engines and instruments, were removed, the interiors disemboweled and sealed by the Air Force. All that remained were the empty shells, waiting to be destroyed for the sake of secrecy by their creators. In winning their respective contracts, Lockheed and Pratt & Whitney would continue the development and production of their YF-22, which would lead to the production F-22 Raptor. But, ironically, the Cold War became an issue of the past. The threat that was there when the effort first started was gone. As for PAV-1 and PAV-2, they remained at Edwards Air Force Base for 5 years. Anonymous icons to a lost government contract. Desert denizens collecting dust and memories. Because man and machine have, for centuries, shared an indomitable spiritual connection. On one memorable morning in 1995, a team traveled to Edwards Air Force Base to bring PAV-2 back home for restoration. Upon its arrival back in Hawthorne, California, PAV-2 was restored to its former glory by some of the original team who built her. Ironically, the restoration occurred in the same hangar building in which she was first built. PAV-2 can be viewed at the Western Museum of Flight in Torrance, California. PAV-1 is displayed permanently at the National Museum of the U.S. Air Force in Dayton, Ohio. The history of aviation is written by the winners, but sometimes the most captivating stories belong to those who showed us a different future. The YF-23 was more than just an aircraft. It was a glimpse into an alternate timeline, a bold declaration of what was possible. Today, the engines are cold and the canopy collects dust. But for those who built it, and for those who see it now, it will never be just a machine. It is a masterpiece of design, a vessel of dreams, and a silent echo of a powerful roar that once owned the desert sky. A legend, not of what was, but of everything that could have been.
In many ways, the F-22 Advanced Tactical Fighter is the true daughter of the F-117. Stealth will be a major factor in the USA remaining a superpower in the 21st century. We work very hard with the F-22 to integrate stealth into a supersonic, super-maneuverable fighter, and we succeeded. After our last day of YF-22A flight demonstrations from Edwards, late on December 28, 1990, I said to my wife Judea, "We won, and we did." Our team delivered results. It was a privilege to lead this team. The F-22 Raptor was the most advanced aircraft of its kind, designed around the principle of first look, first shot, first kill. It's set to become the primary air superiority fighter for the US Air Force in the 21st century. The Raptor, as its name suggests, is a lethal machine. As menacing as it appears, it's even more deadly when deployed for its missions. Deadly and undetectable from long distances. This stunning 5th-generation fighter combines unparalleled dogfighting abilities with precise ground attack capabilities. Confidence in these objectives stems from a synergistic blend of features and capabilities, including stealth technology, the ability to cruise at supersonic speeds over long distances without afterburners, and an integrated, highly sophisticated avionics suite. The FA-22A has been designed to be more maneuverable, better armed, more reliable, easier to maintain, more readily supportable, and more capable in air-to-ground missions than any other comparable aircraft in history. Throughout the 1960s and 70s, the Soviets developed various missiles to attack at different altitude bands, making it impossible to fly under or over the missile threat. You had to confront it directly. One way to address this was to prioritize the suppression of enemy air defenses, specifically by destroying missile sites and their radars, as the most crucial mission for the Air Force. By the 1970s, air superiority had once again become a top priority, leading the US Air Force to commit to building its first pure air superiority fighter, which would eventually become the F-15 Eagle.
I have never seen a finer joint government industry team that's organized with the technical competence to carry out the job that's been assigned to them, or to do it in a manner of close-knit teamwork.
However, just as the F-15s became operational in 1978, alarming new evidence suggested that their superiority might be short-lived. At the same time, and perhaps most importantly, reconnaissance satellites photographed several new fighter prototypes, the Mikoyan MiG-29 and the Sukhoi T-10 at the Romanskoye Flight Test Center near Zhukovsky, about 40 miles southeast of Moscow. This new generation represented a significant improvement in capability over anything previously observed by US intelligence services. It was clear to everyone involved that a new air-to-air combat platform will be necessary to counter the threat posed by these new Russian aircraft. The Sukhoi T-10 was a huge shock to Western analysts. It was larger than the F-15 and far bigger than any previous Soviet-built fighter. If the MiG-29 had already concerned the American military establishment, the existence of the Sukhoi T-10 set off alarm bells. These aircraft were highly advanced, capable of competing with some of the top NATO fighters like the Phantom and ultimately the F-15. Just weeks into his first term, America's 40th president increased US defense spending by $32.5 billion, initiating a massive rearmament of the United States. In 1981, the Cold War was heating up. As Reagan and Brezhnev faced off, the US Air Force concluded that it urgently needed a replacement for its F-15, an advanced tactical fighter, ATF, that would have no equal. As American planners began developing the concept of air-land battle to prepare for a potential World War III, the US Air Force started considering the type of equipment it would need for such a conflict. On August 24, 1982, a Program Management Directive (PMD) was issued, changing the program element's name from Combat Aircraft Technology to Advanced Tactical Fighter. Concurrently, two sub-projects were established under this banner: the Advanced Tactical Fighter, which included concept and technology development. 7 airframe companies, Boeing, General Dynamics, Grumman, Lockheed, McDonnell Douglas, Northrop and Rockwell each received $1 million concept development investigation contracts, and the Joint Fighter Engine, an engine technology demonstration program managed jointly with the US Navy. Pratt & Whitney and General Electric each received contracts valued at $202 million in September 1983. Other companies contending for the contract included Allison, Garrett, and Teledyne CAE. The 7 competing companies submitted a total of 19 conceptual designs, ranging from Northrop's lightweight cooperative fighter, smaller than an F-16, to Lockheed's battle cruiser, based on the design of their short-lived technology, is to make an airplane virtually invisible to the enemy. An aircraft's shape must reflect incoming radio waves away from enemy radar, rather than towards it. To further enhance low observability characteristics, an airplane is covered in materials that absorb radar signals, further reducing its visibility on a radar screen. Leading the way in stealth technology was Lockheed Skunk Works. In 1977, amid unprecedented security, Lockheed had flown a prototype of the world's first stealth fighter. By the 1980s, during Operation Just Cause, its F-117 had helped to dismantle General Noriega's regime in Panama. Now, the US Air Force decided that any new fighter must incorporate stealth technology, and identified 2 other areas in which a future air superiority fighter should excel. The challenge was issued, and it was up to the finest aviation manufacturers in the world to respond. The Advanced Tactical Fighter program was about to begin, and the Raptor, America's 5th-generation fighter, was about to be hatched. By 1983, US-Soviet relations had reached a new low. Following Leonid Brezhnev's death, the Politburo, now controlled by former KGB boss Yuri Andropov, was labeled by Reagan as the focus of evil in the modern world. Continuing his policy of rearmament, Reagan announced plans for the Strategic Defense Initiative, better known as Star Wars, prompting a furious reaction from Moscow. In August, when Korean Airlines Flight 007, on its way to Seoul from New York, strayed several hundred miles off course into Soviet airspace, Russia responded. A fighter was dispatched, and the civilian airliner, with 269 people on board, was shot down. The shooting down of KAL 007 sent shockwaves around the world, straining international relations to the breaking point. Reagan's reaction to the crisis strengthened US conviction that stealth would now be the prime requirement for America's new fighter. Following 4 initial drafts, the basic framework for the ATF requirement was released to the industry. This framework called for a radius of action of approximately 800 miles, supersonic cruise capability of 1.4 to 1.5 Mach, a 2,000-foot runway requirement, a gross takeoff weight of 50,000 pounds, and a unit cost of no produce major components. Lockheed, whose initial design studies had been considered front-runners during the early ATF reviews, had begun consortium discussions. Consequently, Lockheed assigned Sherman Mullin as general manager for the ATF Team Program Office. Mullin would lead Lockheed in the prime contractor role, leveraging the unique technical strengths of both Boeing and General Dynamics. 2 weeks later, Northrop followed suit by leading a Special Air Force designation YF-23. At the end of the process, one of these designs would become America's new advanced tactical. Months after being selected to build the demonstration and validation fighters for the US Air Force, Lockheed shocked everyone by scrapping its broad solid body and a conventional wing. Unlike Lockheed's other stealth aircraft, the F-117, radar-absorbent materials were not applied over the entire F-22, but used selectively on its edges, cavities, and critical surface areas. The F-22 carries its weapons internally. 4 weapons bays are hidden in the central mid-body section. 6 missiles can be carried in the ventral bays, which are covered with bifold doors. The side bays each hold 1 Sidewinder missile on a trapeze launcher. The mid-body section also houses the fighter's landing gear and complex inlet ducts. Attached to the mid-body is the forebody, which accommodates the cockpit and advanced avionics. Both the YF-23 and the YF-22 are impressive-looking machines, but their performance still needs to be tested. The most crucial stage of the competition is still to come, the flight testing. Northrop was first in the air. In August 1990, flown by Paul Metz, the YF-23 got airborne. The test was a huge success, but Lockheed was quick to respond. On September the 29th, at Edwards Air 23, clearly demonstrated that in every category it was far superior to any existing fighter. But it would be events in 1991 that would carve out the Raptor's future.
The 2 aircraft you see here, or you've seen in action in the flying prototypes, I think are an excellent demonstration of exactly what we were trying to accomplish with this demonstration validation front end and the prototyping and hardware demonstration, including the avionics test beds that went along with that. We ended up with 2 aircraft, each one of which could meet the Air Force's technical specifications and technical requirements. And that's why, as I said in the formal remarks, that we had here a set of proposals or a set of contract options any one of which was in the acceptable range and any one of which could have been selected. So we were dealing with shades of differences. Given that all of the proposals were in the acceptable range, we had to make the evaluation based on the criteria that were called out in the RFP, and we've done that, and the best I can do for you today is to report the final judgment of that process.
22 minutes after midnight on January the 17th, 1991, Lockheed's stealth F-117 spearheaded US strikes against Saddam Hussein's regime. The performance of Lockheed's stealth bombers during Operation Desert Storm gave the company and its aircraft priceless publicity. However, another aircraft also emerged from the Gulf War with a glowing reputation. The F-15, the aircraft destined to be replaced by the ATF, emphatically confirmed its status as the foremost air superiority fighter in the world. Now, it appeared that the need for an advanced stealth fighter, the F-22, might be unfounded. But not everyone agreed. By April 1992 announced the winner of the Advanced Tactical Fighter contract. Would the Raptor emerge from the controversy unscathed? After the DEM-VAL flight tests of the prototypes, the Secretary of the Air Force, Donald Rice, announced that the Lockheed team and Pratt & Whitney were the winners of the ATF and engine competitions.
The DEM-VAL phase has accomplished the risk reduction and the design trade-offs that are its purpose. Its success is demonstrable in the excellent performance of the prototypes and the quality of the proposals from the contractor teams. To ensure the fairest possible evaluation of these outstanding designs and development teams, the evaluation process that we've been through has been intensive, thorough, and professional. That evaluation was conducted by Air Force and Navy teams, by a team involving both Air Force and Navy personnel, included not only the developer community, but users, testers, contracts experts, cost analysts, and all who would be involved in the next phase of development. The success of the demonstration validation phase and this formal evaluation process is also demonstrated by the fact that the evaluators were able to bring to me as the source selection authority 4 awardable contracts, each of which represented acceptable proposals that met Air Force requirements. However, in evaluating the engine and airframe proposals, one combination clearly offered better capability with lower cost, thereby providing the Air Force with a true best value. With all that said, I now announce that the ATF team will be composed of the Pratt & Whitney company who designed the F-119 engine, which will be integrated into the F-22, designed by Lockheed, team with Boeing and General Dynamics.
The YF-23 design was considered stealthier and faster, while the YF-22, with its thrust vectoring nozzles, was more maneuverable as well as less expensive and risky. Having won the contract, Lockheed announced that it would locate the F-22's headquarters in Georgia, where the Raptor's forward fuselage would be built. General Dynamics would construct the F-22's mid-body section in Fort Worth, Texas, and Boeing would manufacture the wings and tail in Seattle, Washington. Follow-on work with the aircraft took place at Edwards Air Force Base, involving an additional 100 hours of flying time, approximately 25 flights, to expand the YF-22A's flight envelope and to explore specific segments in greater detail. However, on April 25, 1992, the program encountered its first major setback. During preliminary testing, the YF-22, flown by Tom Morgenfeld, crashed shortly after takeoff. The aircraft hit and caught fire. A key element of the Raptor's design, thrust vectoring, uses movable exhaust nozzles to adjust the angle of thrust from the two Pratt & Whitney engines. As the Raptor made its low-level flyby, Tom Morgenfeld kept the stick forward to keep the nose down. However, aircraft towards the tarmac. The pilot struggled to correct this sudden change in direction as the Raptor began to veer off course. Despite the loss of the stealth aircraft, the program had achieved its major goals. 10 million man-hours of analysis, 4,000 hours of radar testing, and hundreds of hours of flight testing had gone into the aircraft's development, even before construction began. In fact, the F-22 had undergone more flight testing than any other fighter before full-scale production. On April the 9th, the first F-22A, officially named Raptor, an earlier attempt to name the aircraft Superstar failed in 1991, was unveiled in a public ceremony at Lockheed Martin's Marietta, Georgia facility. Air Force pilots would soon have the opportunity to evaluate the new aircraft themselves. First flown by the Air Force in 1997, pilots at Edwards Air Force Base surpassed 2,000 flight test hours in over 900 missions. One of the key advances in the Raptor's design is its advanced cockpit and integrated avionics systems. Key mission systems include the Sanders General Electric Electronic Warfare System, the Martin Marietta Infrared and Ultraviolet Missile Launch Detector, the TRW Communication Navigation Identification Suite, and the Long Range Advanced IRST USAF aircraft featuring a center-mounted ejection control. The F-22 is equipped with a sophisticated life support system, including an onboard oxygen generation system, protective pilot garments, and a breathing regulator anti-G valve that controls the flow and pressure to the pilot's mask and garments. The Raptor carries a formidable array of ordnance. It has 3 internal weapons bays, a large main bay located on the bottom of the fuselage, and 2 smaller bays situated on the sides of the fuselage aft of the engine inlets. The main bay is divided along the center line and can accommodate 6 launchers for beyond visual range missiles, while each side bay contains a launcher for short-range missiles. The primary air-to-air missiles are the AIM-120 AMRAAM and the AIM-9 Sidewinder, with plans to integrate the AIM-260 JATM in the future. Missile launchers require the bay doors to be open for less than a second. During this brief time, pneumatic or hydraulic arms push the missiles clear of the aircraft to minimize detection and allow deployment during high-speed flight. Although the F-22 typically carries its weapons internally, the wings feature 4 hardpoints, each rated to handle 5,000 pounds, 2,300 kilograms. Each hardpoint can be equipped with a pylon capable of carrying a detachable 600-gallon, 2,270-litre external fuel tank, or a launcher holding 2 air-to-air missiles. In addition to its armament of 8 missiles, the fighter is also equipped with a gun. At one point during the evolution of the Advanced Tactical Fighter program, the US Air Force considered eliminating the gun to save weight. By the late 1990s, pilots involved in the Raptor program were confident that their aircraft could easily outperform and defeat any other fighter. This confidence, however, was based primarily on controlled flight and missile firing exercises. What these pilots truly needed was combat experience, and they were about to get it. The F-22 is equipped with an internally mounted M61A2 Vulcan 20mm rotary cannon embedded in the right-wing root with the muzzle covered by a retractable door. The cannon's firing path is displayed on the pilot's head-up display. Before the F-22 Raptor enters operational service with the US Air Force in the autumn of 2005, it will undergo thousands of hours of rigorous combat testing. Despite this, critics of the F-22 program argued that the F-15 Eagle, which the Raptor is intended to replace, already possesses the attributes necessary to remain the world's premier air superiority fighter well into the new millennium. This view is dismissed by the US Air Force. In March 2003, supporters of the F-15 were given the opportunity to test whether the Eagle was still the best fighter in the sky. 5 F-15s were pitted against a single Raptor in a head-to-head exercise. Although no missiles were used, the sorties closely resembled actual combat, with no quarter given by either side. It was a kill or be killed scenario. All 5 F-15s were piloted by experienced F-22 pilots. One by one, the Raptor brought them down. In these combat tests against F-15s, the F-22 Raptor decisively proved its critics wrong. In December 2005, the USAF announced that the F-22 had achieved initial operational capability. During Exercise Northern Edge in Alaska in June 2006, 12 F-22s engaged in simulated combat exercises, downing 108 adversaries with no losses. Over the course of these exercises, the F-22 achieved 241 kills against 2 losses, neither of which involved an F-22. Due to US federal law aimed at protecting its stealth technology and classified features, the F-22 cannot be exported. Instead, US fighter customers are opting for earlier models like the F-15 Eagle and the F-16 Fighting Falcon, or the newer F-35 Lightning II. The F-35 incorporates some technology from the F-22, but is designed to be more affordable, flexible, and exportable. Originally, the USAF planned to acquire 750 ATFs. However, by 2009, the program was cut to 187 operational aircraft due to high costs, a lack of air-to-air missions because of the focus on counterinsurgency operations, a ban on exports, and the development of the more affordable and versatile F-35. The last F-22 was delivered in 2012. The F-22 Raptor was conceived amid Cold War fears that Russian-made fighters might outclass the F-15. Yet, as the world has evolved since the Cold War, the United States Air Force remains the sole operator of the F-22. As of August 2022, it has 183 aircraft in its inventory. In today's changing world, there are few certainties, but the F-22's dominance over the skies remains one of them.